This is a scene from Beyonce's music video Lemonade, and as you can see right here, when the door opens, the water is released. And this is, of course, another Illuminati ritual, a satanic ritual having to do with what? The birthing of the New World Order. And we're already seeing the beginning effects with it from Hurricane Harvey and even soon to come Hurricane Irma, and with many other events that are already trickling, such as the record wildfires and even all of the activity that's been going on around Yellowstone National Park. But we know it's not just hurricanes that they're preparing for. They're also preparing for events such as Yellowstone, the West Coast to be flooded, the East Coast, and it looks like they're already preparing for that with Irma, with wildfires in any way, shape, or form that they can in order to, quote, force evacuate and prepare and condition the masses for enforced martial law and the military movement, as we're already seeing in Texas. And also, it's interesting to note with the wildfires, they've already forced evacuated people from their homes, the National Guard's already being called. And just like how we even saw with Hurricane Harvey, how within days of the hurricane striking Texas, there were already well over 30,000 National Guard troops that were brought into Texas. And even one of their national troops mentioned as the Phoenix Rises. Brock Long, who is the director of FEMA, has already stated that FEMA will be staying in Texas for many years due to the storm. Close to 500,000 people are expected to file for FEMA assistance, and there has been curfew enforced in the Houston area as of last week. Could all of this be a test for Hurricane Irma next week on the East Coast? And for those who are thinking, oh, but the National Guard and the military, oh, they're just doing their jobs, and oh, Walmart and all of them are to help the people, and oh, they're about helping the people with the government, it's time to think again. Because there are many low-income neighborhoods in the Houston and in the Texas area that have not been receiving adequate treatment and aid from the government when it came to Hurricane Harvey. And what they're not going to tell you, because they're trying to keep it under wraps and keep it quiet, is that they're practicing for rounding up these people and placing them into FEMA camps. And of course, they're not going to call them that. But now I'm going to show you footage and even documentation showing you that that's exactly what they're getting ready for and have been preparing for, and are even preparing for Hurricane Irma on the East Coast, should Hurricane Irma strike on the East Coast.
Jake, who is homeless. Jake, you found yourself some shelter here. Why are you outside during this entire hurricane?
Well, I chose not to go inside yesterday because the Salvation Army and Russian Winds Homeless Shelter, where they were accepting people, were caught killing everybody that was in there. Were caught killing everybody that was in there. Were caught killing everybody that was in there.
And mind you, the first video that I showed you has been deleted on social media platforms such as Facebook, Controlled Opposition. But now I'm even going to show you an ABC clip that even proves, and they literally even tell you that Walmart is placing people into truckloads and carrying them away.
Went back underneath the bridge, and they were loading up with as many people. It's got to be dozens of people in the back of that thing. They take them to a nearby Walmart. 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 And then the Walmart is where, I guess, metro buses or school buses will take them to the shelter. And then the Walmart is where, I guess, metro buses or school buses will take them to the shelter. And then the Walmart is where, I guess, metro buses or school buses will take them to the shelter. The question is, what shelter are they taking them to? Because I heard Tom say GRB is overcrowded and or not overcrowded, but at the capacity they had planned for. So I think I certainly have that question. I don't know if we've answered it.
And they really have nowhere to go. At least they have a system where they're taking them to a Walmart where they can be inside and wait and figure out what comes next. At least they have a system where they're taking them to a Walmart where they can be inside and wait and figure out what comes next.
The people I talked to all with the exception of one, they all were eager to go wherever the truck would take them. Interestingly enough, the Coast Guard helicopters and the National Guard helicopters had pulled away. I hear one. There's no way we can see it. It's too far off, but I heard it pass over. A military helicopter. I had talked to a sheriff's deputy earlier. They said they had a quadriplegic who was stuck in his home and obviously needed immediate rescue. But and they were going to try and do that one with a chopper. I don't know if that's what we're hearing, but I know that was something that they were discussing.
Hi, I'm Janet Napolitano, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Homeland Security begins with hometown security. That's why I'm pleased that Walmart is helping to make our communities more safe and secure.
This is no longer conspiracy theory. This is now conspiracy truth, because now they're actually testing it, and now they're actually doing it right in front of you. And now they have Hurricane Irma coming right after. What a coincidence, because they're trying to get everyone's attention on this hurricane to get the masses' attention focused on that, away from FEMA and the imposed martial law and what they're really doing behind closed doors that's really going on in Texas. Because yes, it's another test run and a test drill for martial law, along with the quarantine, the military roundup, and to see how long it takes for them to bring in the military to these places in order to impose martial law before testing it onto America. That's why the governor immediately declared a state of emergency in well over 30 counties to see how fast they could bring in the National Guard. And that's why Walmart themselves recently enacted their facial recognition program in order to turn America into the Orwellian state that it's already in. And later on in the video, you're going to see with government documentation and executive orders that are unconstitutional, by the way, that were signed and passed by your lovely presidents from the 1960s onward, that when a state of emergency is declared, wherever it might be, the government has the so-called legal right to take ownership and claim ownership of whatever lands and resources that is there, paving the way for military takeover and martial law. This is in government documentation, which you're going to see soon enough. If you can recall, I did a video from last year that talked all about Walmart and the real reason that they're closing. And in that video, I told you how Walmarts are being converted into FEMA camps, and they're secretly, surreptitiously doing this behind closed doors. And they're also doing this via secret underground military bases, because I also told you about the DUMS program, which is the deep underground military bases. Because your government has been planning this for how many decades now and have been building underground cities, even that are underground as we speak. And they are underground tunnels that connect to one another that will be used to transport people into FEMA camps and into converted military bases. Because yes, the military bases will also be converted into FEMA camps and will be used for FEMA camps, along with abandoned warehouses and many other abandoned places where railroads are nearby. Because it was announced back in 2015 that several Walmarts would be closing due to plumbing issues for a period of about 6 months, and we know that they're not closing for no plumbing issues. And then in the year 2016 alone, it was reported that how many hundreds of Walmarts closed, along with hundreds of other stores. And in 2017, it was reported that this year alone, that many more mainstream stores such as Macy's and JCPenney would also be closing their doors. Could they be closing their doors with an agenda in mind? Could they be converting these stores just like they're converting the Walmarts? In Season 1, Episode 8, in the episode called Road Kansas, Jericho even depicts and talks about Walmart and seems to allude to Walmart FEMA camps, which also come after the event and aftermath of an EMP. Has your government been preparing for all of these things, especially with all the drills going on, and are they literally telling you the truth right in front of your face? Let's find out.
I didn't know Roker ever had a SWAT team. They don't. These guys aren't cops. Government contractors. Ravenwood. What are mercenaries doing in Kansas? Same thing they've been doing in Iraq and New Orleans. The military's been stretched so thin the past few years, mercenaries became a commodity. What are you doing in Kansas?
Not enough National Guard? Homeland Security hired us. Brought us in to protect the governor of Nebraska.
Wait, the governor's alive?
Don't know. They brought us over here to help FEMA evacuate Rogue River.
Where to?
FEMA set up a tent city. Walmart parking lot. A few miles north of here.
Now we're going to be going over a compilation of films that all talk about and have to do with the predictive programming of martial law being enforced in America, the truth right in front of you. And the first movie that we're going to talk about comes from 1998 called The Siege. Now in this particular scene, the character of Denzel Washington receives a phone call. After being instructed to turn on the television, this is what shows and plays on the television screen. The television screen shows a series of military vehicles that are being rolled into the city of New York, along with the military and the troops appearing onto the streets. And then the news reporter reports, quote, "The Senate remained in emergency session late into the night debating the president's call for martial law. We have in this country a tradition of invoking martial law only when the most dire of circumstances require it." And in the film, they also bring up the terrorism agenda because they always love bringing that up as an excuse to bring in the military along with staged events and man-made weather events such as Hurricane Harvey, and even as we're seeing with Irma too. And then, in the very next scene of the movie, martial law is actually announced under the War Powers Act, which is an actual resolution that was passed back in 1973, which gives check for the president's power to deploy military forces in an armed conflict without the consent of Congress. And then in the next scene, they show internment camps ready to go. And just as I've talked about in previous video, many of your stores are already converting their stores into what appear to be internment camps. And they're secretly converting schools and abandoned malls and any abandoned public facilities into these places, as you see right here, especially abandoned warehouses also. And pay careful attention to this also, because in the next scene they also show the military rounding up people and putting them on school buses, and you see this for a majority of the films. Someone in the film also mentions how they're going house to house. The next film is a clip from 1973 entitled The Crazies, and this particular scene involves a police officer who encounters this. Upon hearing a bunch of screams, when the officer goes outside, the officer is then met with a bunch of military who immediately grab and interrogate and immediately are threatening to shoot. The military then clear the area and take the police officer and load him onto a bus. As you can see, here's the officer that they load him onto and that the military place him on. And we're going to talk about why that's so important, because a government document even talks about and shows the same thing that comes from your army. The military then tell him to sit in the open seat that's available, and you can see that there are many others who are sitting there also. And then, after everyone is loaded onto the school bus then trails a military vehicle from the man's house, as you see right here, the military displacing people and taking them from their homes and placing them onto school bus, as they even show you in the films, where they are then deported to a military facility where they are to stay. But this is just a movie, right? Here they show the school buses arriving to the facilities that look and strikingly are similar to the FEMA camps, and you're going to see that they show the exact same thing in the film The Fifth Wave later on to come. Here they show people that are locked behind the cages and locked behind fences, and there are other films that also show the same thing. They even show officers shooting as people try to escape. In the movie RoboCop 3 that aired in 1993, they show a scene depicting Detroit where military units are deployed onto the streets. And right away, the military cops that are deployed onto the street, they immediately start grabbing people forcibly and start removing them. The scene even shows them whipping other people with batons, forcibly pushing them, applying force in armed conflict. What are they actually doing? And when someone is asking and inquiring for help, that's when one of the cops tells them to get onto the bus. Here, once again, they show all of the buses lined up and ready to go, and they even show the military pushing people onto the buses, and this is coming from the films themselves. And then a woman boldly makes an announcement for the people to stay and to remain in the city, not to go onto the buses. But by that point, they're all deployed and detained on the buses against their will. The next scene is from 2006, entitled Children of Men. Now, if you pay close attention, this man is coming off the train and you see all of the military that's all around him. But notice how you see people to the left of him that are locked up in these cages with nowhere to go. And as the man keeps going, the military is continuously watching over and blocking the people from getting out of the cages. Could this be a draconian style, Orwellian style type of law, the rule of law, martial law? And then in another scene, as the man keeps going, the police are lined up, armed and ready to go with shields and batons and everything. And then if you keep going, they show what appears to be a so-called low-income neighborhood with the police surrounding it. And we know darn well that this was the same case for Katrina and Hurricane Harvey. And are they planning the same thing with Irma, to go into these neighborhoods and do these things? To secretly bring the people to FEMA camps via Walmart and other means and methods of transportation? Was Harvey just a practice run, because they're even showing you what's going on? Another movie that shows the same thing is 1988 from the film They Live, where the police are seen rummaging through the streets and they even have bulldozers to try to round people up and quarantine them on buses and detain them. They even show a scene involving the police beating down on another man. Is this coming to a state near you? Like I said, was Hurricane Harvey just another test run and a practice run to see how they can enact all of this on a grand scale? And then there's also the movie Divergent that came out in 2014 based on the popular book and based on the popular series that also shows the same thing, a martial law-filled Chicago. This is very reminiscent of the movie Amerigeddon that came out last year that I also did a video and report on and talked about, that also shows the exact same thing. In this part of Divergent, you can also hear alarm sirens that are ringing too. Here comes the military troops as the people are frantically running away. The next movie that's rife with predictive programming comes from last year, entitled The Fifth Wave, where in a series of 5 waves the world experiences end times. Wave 1 is an EMP, which causes the power to go out in America, and again, it's no surprise or coincidence because we saw that exactly with Hurricane Harvey with Houston, because a power outage affected up to 250,000 people. Wave 2 has to do with hurricanes and tsunamis that are then seen across the world. Wave 3 is pestilence and a plague that wipes out multitudes of populations. And then Wave 4 is imposed martial law, when the so-called aliens who pose as the others start to come with the silencers known as the military, who they're controlled by. As you can see in this scene right here, here is a team of yellow school buses that are heading inside a facility that's armed and ready to go. As you can see, the buses are heading inside one by one into a barraged area. Here the buses arrived in a crowded facility that almost looks very resembling of a FEMA camp. Now in the movie itself, those who are inside the school buses are actually children, and then the children are then escorted out of the bus and onto the ground. The children are then given a number, and then they must wait for their number to be called. Once their number has been called, the children are then escorted inside of the facility, and there they are being tested in order to be screened for RFID technology for the chip to be inserted into them. And we know that these chips are going to be used by our government for what? Spying and control. Now in the movie itself, the chip is inserted through the neck of the child, And then afterwards, the military then enlists the children in the war in order to help them find the others, so to speak, because the chip then detects who the others are, which are the humans who do not have the chip, and they're instructed to kill others who do not have the chip inserted into them. And this is revealed towards the end of the movie once the chip is actually removed. Now, the most telling out of all of these movies actually comes from a concept trailer that was done back in 2012 entitled Gray State. And as you can see, it opens up with this statement here: it happened while we were sleeping. Now, in the trailer alone, what's most telling about all of this is how they show military vehicles in places and neighborhoods such as the public parks. They even show on the news the administering of the RFID chip, and I even done a video covering this last month of a company that's even using RFID technology. In the trailer, they even show the stamp of the RFID technology being induced into people. And note how it's also a triangle just like the pyramid. They also show a cashless society where you don't need cash or a card to pay for your items at the store. All you need is the use of your hand and the use of your arm. But then they also show deeper truths such as hyperinflation, the economy shutting down, trackers on phones in order to track your every move, riots and protesting, travels being suspended and flights canceled. And yes, they even have a scene where it shows martial law being declared on the news with the National Guard deploying in order to quell rioting. Does this sound familiar? As we've talked about in previous videos, they even showed the UN vehicles and the UN trucks coming in. And as we talked about, they've been sneakily placing these into places strategically, as we've talked about the past how many years now. And also they have the UN vehicles and the barraging, people barraging too. And what do you see over here? FEMA is involved too. They show the stores completely out of food and water. And if you keep going in the trailer, they also show who? The military and the police, but they also show what? FEMA? Isn't FEMA planning to stay in Texas for how many years according to the director? Is this another test? And as we've talked about, they're already getting ready for the East Coast with Hurricane Irma and many other storms that are going to be taking place, along with Yellowstone, New Madrid, the San Andreas fault line for the West Coast, and many other places. And you don't think they're preparing for this? You don't think they're conditioning as they already are with Texas? That's why they don't want your attention on Texas anymore, because they know they're already preparing and testing these things ahead of time, which is why you saw the man-made storm, Hurricane Harvey. And after all of the rioting and protesting, more military trucks and vehicles come in, courtesy your government, who you claim is helping you. Well, not according to this, because this comes from who? The Homeland Security Department of DHS, which is teaming with Walmart, as I've just shown you in a video earlier ago. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. Like the other previous films, the military are seen breaking into people's homes. And if you look very carefully, the FEMA guards are seen intruding upon and making war with the citizens. And like I said, this movie is so telling, and this is just the trailer alone. And by the way, it shows FEMA. And like I said, folks, FEMA is in Texas right now, where they're going to stay for how many years after the devastating storm, said to be one of the most devastating and one of the most costly in history. And then here comes Irma. What are they really getting ready for? Now, another thing I thought that was very telling about this film comes from the end of the trailer, where it says the Second American Revolution. And I also did a video covering this a few weeks ago about the Second Civil War. And just as we saw with the Charlottesville riots, not to mention the Trump comments that he made about North Korea and World War, along with the Truman comments that are very parallel indeed, just like the Purge movie that I talked about also that came out last year, The Purge 3. Is that what they're preparing for in America? Captain America Civil War? Is it starting to make sense? But how far is these movies from the truth? Because remember, you're the one living in a fantasy. Because did your government already plan all of this ahead of time? Well, let's find out. Because now I'm showing you a list of executive orders that your presidents have signed into office that allow the government control, hostage, and takeover should a national emergency be declared. And I've gone over this in several videos, along with things such as the McCarran Act and even the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, where the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, and the Department of Defense, the DoD, they can do what? They can fund